One of the most common questions I get from flower farmers is how much space do I need to get started with selling flowers to florists? And then the next question that is right after that is how many varieties of flowers should I grow and how much of each of those varieties of flowers do I need to get started? And because there's a lot of flower farmers that feel this way and they're just not sure if they have enough, they simply don't get started with selling to florists. Today, I'm going to walk through that with you and I'm going to give you real numbers and benchmarks so that you can start thinking about what this would look like on your flower farm. Hi, I'm Ruth Ann from Abundant Blooms Flower Farm in West Michigan, and I sell flowers almost exclusively to florists from my almost 1 acre of production flower farm. But I actually didn't start with 1 acre. I'll tell you later how much I started with. I'm going into my 7th year of flower farming, and I also sell educational resources to flower farmers to help them sell directly to florists as well. So this question about how much space do I need and how many flowers do I need was a common question that I got leading up to my recent webinar that I just finished a few days ago. And it was such a common question that I am creating a video to answer that question. So let's break it down here. So first we're going to start with how much space do you need to start with? I think that people wait too long and that they think that they need a lot of space. Well, I can tell you from this space in my high tunnel, which is 30 by 72, this is pretty much what I'm selling out of in early spring to my florists. And this is not a huge space. This is actually a very small space, but this can produce thousands and thousands of stems. And so that's the same is true. Like most flower farmers know how tightly we can plant our flowers. For instance, these poppies behind me are like 3 inches. Those pansies, 2 to 4 inches. My snapdragons are super tight. Even flowers like zinnias and cosmos, those I space 8 to 9 inches apart. Almost nothing gets spaced more than, at least not an annual, gets spaced more than 9 inches apart for me. And so when you think about how tightly you're spacing, you really can grow a lot of flowers in a really small space. I didn't have an acre when I started flower farming at all, or I didn't have an acre in production. When I sold to florists, I started on, it was about, I'm trying to remember exactly, but it was 65 by 100 feet. And actually the year before that was my first year growing and I sold not to florists, and that was about half that space, like more like a 40 by 100 space. Actually, I think it was like 40 by 80, so it was about half of that, and then I doubled that the next year. But still, a 65 by 100 foot plot is not huge. I mean, I would estimate I grow on about 10 times that at least or more now. That might sound small, or hopefully that sounds, achievable to you, but because you're growing so intensively, you're growing lots and lots of stems. So this is especially important if you're succession planting. Again, that 65 by 100 plot wasn't 100% producing at one period of time. I was succession planting. I had cool flowers. I had summer, early summer succession. I had a late summer succession, and then I had fall planted cool flowers as well. So I had kind of four, like fall planted cool flowers, spring planted cool flowers, and 2 summer successions. And some of those things can overlap, right? Like I can plant my second summer succession where my fall planted cool flowers were, right? So, but again, you're not having that entire space in production at one given moment. You can grow a lot of flowers in a small space. So the next question is, how many varieties of flowers should I have or do I need to have? So here I'm going to say a benchmark. I would say that the benchmark is to have 10 varieties of flowers. And so obviously you can grow more than 10 varieties of flowers, but you would have like 10 blooming in June, 10 blooming in July, August, and September. And the 10 blooming in September are not going to be the same 10 as you had in June. And the reason I say 10 is because I think 10 is enough flowers, enough varieties to make it worth it for a florist to buy from you. So what do I mean by that? It's worth it for them to pay a delivery fee for you to come. It gives them enough variety. Maybe they're not ordering all 10, but they're ordering, 2 bunches of 5 different varieties. Well, that gives them 10 bunches of flowers that they bought from you. let's say that they're $10 to $12 a bunch. That's, a $120 order, and then you're getting a delivery fee. That makes it worth it for them, I think, or at least that's been my experience. So I think aiming for 10 is a really great starting bench point. So for example, I was kind of caught by the beautiful specialty daffodil bulbs, and I think that specialty daffodils are incredibly beautiful. And I bought a bunch of specialty daffodils for my cut flower farm early on in my flower farming journey, and I still have them, but I don't sell them. I don't sell most of them because for me, daffodils are the very first thing to bloom, and I have nothing else blooming. So it's not worth it for a florist to buy a couple bunches of daffodils from me when I have nothing else to offer them. It's not worth it for them to pay a delivery fee, and it's not worth it for me to drive all over to sell $30 to $50 worth of flowers, if that, to a shop. Unless you're going to connect with the right timing with a wedding and event florist that's going to need a whole bunch of daffodils, they're just not worth it because I have nothing else to go with them. So I have, like, last year I hardly sold any of them. They were really beautiful. I sold some of the later blooming ones, but I I just didn't sell many of them. The later blooming ones that overlap with some of my tulips, those probably work the best. So that's just an example. So there are some exceptions to this. I understand that there are some flower farms that only grow peonies, only grow dahlias. And for something like a dahlia where you can grow so many different varieties and can become an expert on a tricky crop, I think that might work, but that's really the exception. That's not the general rule of thumb for flower farms. And the same thing with peonies. I just think those are really specialty farms. Okay, so I think having 10 varieties is a great benchmark. However, in the early spring, I do not have 10. I still don't have 10. That's actually something I'm trying to work toward. That's why I have poppies planted here. That's why I have pansies and I'm growing them for the first time. That's why I got a tunnel so that I can have early spring crops that will coincide with some of my bulb crops. Hope potentially, if I ever grow tulips again, uh, you can watch my video about how I feel about tulips. But just to be able to have an overlap, early spring flowering branches, all of these things have been intentionally worked into my crop plan over the last 7 years in order to try and hit that. Having, I'd love to be able to have 10 flowers to start my season with. Now, once you get 5 or 6 and it's springtime, usually those flowers are enough to get you started. So don't get too caught up like, oh, I don't have 10, I can't start. You can start with less than that, but I would say by June, July, August, 10 should really be the goal. Okay, then the next question is, so how many of each of those flowers should I have? I would say, again, another good benchmark is to have 10 bunches. I think that that's very attainable and achievable if you get 10 bunches. So 10 bunches of sunflowers, so 100 sunflowers, 100 cosmos, 100 zinnias, and maybe you have half of your cosmos are white and half are pink, something like that. So I think that that's a really good goal to seek to hit, the having 10 bunches. If you have 10 varieties of flowers and you have 10 bunches of each, that gives you 1,000 flowers, 100 bunches to sell every week. And that is certainly plenty to serve 5 to 7 florists, I think. So just a brief caveat here. So florists will tend to buy more. Like if you have 20 crops, they're going to probably buy more from you. Now, all that to say, I don't think you should go crazy and grow 100 different flowers necessarily. That's not what I think. I actually think growing more of less is going to make you a more profitable and streamlined farm. However, I don't actually mean I think you should grow one flower, right? There's a point, there's this balance of, okay, I need to grow more of less, but how do I still have a well-rounded value to bring to my florists? Like I said, having only daffodils has not worked in my experience, to the point where I don't sell them. So you got to kind of have a fine balance there. That's what I would say. Think about having 10 flowers blooming at the same time. I actually put down some examples. Maybe that will be helpful. So if you think, what do I have blooming in June, July, August, September? So for example, your June crops might look like Bupleurum, Nigella, Saponario, Yarrow, Larkspur, Feverfew, Delphinium, and Orlea. That's going to give you a good variety to have your florists and give them a good variety to choose from. And then think like your late summer, August and September crops are not going to look the same, right? You might have zinnias and snapdragons and marigolds and dahlias, cosmos, sunflowers, and then foliage like 9-bark smokebush, raspberry greens, and baptisia foliage. So, kind of thinking it in those terms of that, I think can be helpful. Another question I get is, can you sell to florists your very first year? And to that I say, that depends. I think if you have a lot of experience growing flowers and understanding cut flowers and harvest stage and post-harvest care and understanding that, you probably could sell to florists your first year. But if this is your first year of flower farming, I would say understand the growing and harvesting and succession planting before you dive into selling to florists, because you don't want to start and then not, and then make a bad impression because you actually really don't know what kind of flowers to grow, or what are the correct cut flower varieties. For example, if you didn't know to grow pollenless sunflowers and you sold sunflowers with pollen to a florist, that might ruin that potential relationship forever, right? That's a true story. That's something one of my florists has told me. So I do think that it's really important that you know how to grow the flower. So my first year, I didn't sell to florists. I had never sold flowers before. I didn't know what most flowers were before 2019. Like, I couldn't have told you what a cosmos was or a dahlia. Literally didn't know. And I just saw something from Floret. I was recently out of the military, home with my 2 and then 3 children, and I just needed an outlet. And so I started researching flower farming, and I was like, oh, and anyway, the rest is history. But I did not grow up with flowers. I do not have a horticulture background. I'm a nurse, actually, by education, or by formal education, I should say. So I think that is important, to have a base of growing and cutting and harvesting cut flowers. And I was in my second year of flower farming when I started selling to florists, and I think that's probably a good standard. Like I said, not everyone has to do that, but probably a good place to kind of grow toward. So like I said, we just wrapped up this webinar about 3 steps to profitably sell flowers to florists. And so I got such a lot of great questions and had hundreds of flower farmers in there, and it was so exciting, and I just really enjoyed that. And it just got me really thinking about this question in particular, about how much space do you need and how many flowers do you need. And I think that a lot of people just think that they're not big enough, or they just are afraid to take the leap. And so I just really want to encourage you that if you have that, space, and you have that experience with growing, I just want you to take a moment and just imagine what this season could look like. It's March. I've got nothing blooming. Well, that's not true. I have a pansy over there. Anyway, it's March, and most of us don't have a lot of things blooming, particularly us up in the north, like myself. And so we can start to think about the season and how it might look. So I want you to think if selling flowers to florists would be the right fit for your farm, and what that could look like for your farm. And my first year, I started a florist. I sold about $5,000 worth, and that was with me seriously trying to figure it out as I go. I had no real roadmap. I had just a little tiny tidbit of information about selling to florists that I had gotten from large flower farming course I took from Mason Ziegler, which is an amazing course, but it doesn't talk a lot about selling to florists. It does a little bit, but not a lot. It's more of a growing basic course. So I did all of that with trial and error, and I made $5,000 my first year because I didn't want to be sitting at farmers markets. I had 3 very small children, and I was pregnant actually with my 4th baby that summer. And so I just needed to be able to sell large amounts in one place, and then, move on and go to a couple places. So now imagine, instead of me trying to figure it out, you have systems and you have clarity and you have confidence right from the beginning. And so one thing that I've learned in farming and business is that education really does matter, because even though the course I took from Lisa Mason Ziegler wasn't specifically about selling florists, it gave me the confidence. It had enough in it to give me the confidence to start and to try and to put myself out there. But it didn't give me everything I needed, but it did give me the confidence to start. And I think that investing into education has been one of the most beneficial things that I've done for my farm. Farming education, business education, marketing education has just multiplied my farm. So another way to think about it, instead of how much money you're spending on a course, is if you don't spend this money, how much revenue are you losing out on because you're not having a path forward to make this sales channel possible for you? Or you're fumbling along and you really could get to point B directly instead of going all these roundabout ways, really losing the potential for revenue. And that's really the reason why I created my course, Selling Flowers to Florists, is because there is nothing like it on the market. Literally, there's no course that I'm aware of, tell me if I'm wrong, please, that was specifically for selling flowers to florists. There was some of it in larger, very $1,500, $2,000 courses on farming or business, but there was nothing specific just for this sales channel. And so that is my absolute goal with this course, is to just give you a step-by-step roadmap, exactly how to start. I just go into so much detail. Here's what some of my students say. There's over 100 students that have taken my course, and here's what they say: your content is so comprehensive, you covered it all. It was a light bulb moment when you shared that you sold 10 bunches of sunflowers every week. I'm working to reach that kind of volume now. You confirm that selling flowers to florists is a financially viable option. You gave visuals and checklists, making sure the flowers are all the same height and stage. That was gold. Your explanation of harvest stage totally changed the way I cut. So that is why over the last 6 years, I took everything that I've learned and I created it into this course to help flower farmers like you be able to sell your flowers profitably to florists and not be overwhelmed. So if you want the first step, check out the replay of the webinar that I just did. It's free. There will be a link in the description to watch the replay. It is only going to be available until March 19th. So start there, listen to the webinar, because I want you to be able to go into the sales channel with clarity, understanding that this is a viable way to sell your flowers. But there are a lot of nuances and things that go into the sales channel, and it's not as easy as just cutting what you see in the field and making bouquets and putting them by a roadside stand. Not that that's easy, but that's certainly not easy necessarily to get them to sell, for sure. And then there's one new thing inside my course, which is a brand new pricing guide that I just created. And this is another one of the most common questions I get from farmers is, how do I price my flowers? Or can you tell me your prices? And I really seek to give a lot of education, but for free. But giving out my pricing guide is not something that I give out for free, because there's so much like blood, sweat, and tears and work and effort that has gone into creating the prices. But if you want to know my exact prices from my farm, there is a brand new pricing guide in the course with over 60 flowers that I either grow or have grown on my farm, and you have access to that in the course. And if you're a student of mine and you're watching this, yes, you have it available to you. Any past students, it is in the course now. And there is a coupon code right now. 25 webinar is the coupon code. You can get $25 off the price. I do not have coupons very often because I try to keep the price of the course as reasonable as possible. So my goal isn't to have it be $500 and then have it be half off. I don't do that. So if you want to get this in time to really change your season this flower farming season, now is the time. The coupon code is only available for the next couple of days, so don't wait, because it doesn't come up very often. I honestly had so many people in the webinar. It just really blew me away. I hope that this video gives you some clarity about how much you need to start, how much space you need, how many flowers you need, how many bunches you need, and just gives you something really tangible to help you get into this flower farming season. And if you enjoyed this video, I recommend that you check out my annual crop plan video that I did, because it might give you some ideas about what annuals to grow. And I hope I can see you inside the course. And if you have any questions, please email me. I will respond to you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.